In 1929, years of booming prosperity ended in catastrophe.
Disbelief.
First-time investors borrowed huge amounts of money to speculate on the market.
The market broke very sharply, and a lot of people were wiped out with it. It was very painful.
Later, thousands of banks failed. Millions lost everything.
The crash forced people to sell business and cash in their life savings. That's because brokers called in their loans when the stock market started falling. People scrambled to find enough money to pay for their margins. They lost faith in Wall Street, and you can't have a healthy economy without confidence in the market.
The money supply was vastly extended and expanded, which created, wow, magic, free wealth. Who has to work for a living? I'm just making money by watching my stock ticker go through the roof. And then, as is always the case, inflation refers to an inflation of the money supply. The price inflation the consumers and business-to-business people see is the effect of that. So when you print lots of money, your interest rates go up. Now, that's bad, of course, for a lot of people, and in particular, it's bad for people who borrowed at variable rate loans, and the price of repaying the loans goes up. But it's also really bad for governments, because it drives up the price that they have to pay to maintain the national debt. So then what governments want to do after they print a lot of money is they want to crush down the interest rates or keep them down, but eventually they break free. And then I think it's fair to say we saw in the late 20s the government collapse the money supply.
Many believes earnestly that the stock market crash that occurred on Black Tuesday, October 29, 1922, is one and the same with the Great Depression. In fact, it was one of the major causes that led to the Great Depression. 2 months after the original crash in October, stockholders had lost more than $14 billion. Even though the stock market began to regain some of its losses, by the end of the 1930s, it was not enough, and America truly entered what is called the Great Depression. President Hoover and his advisors underestimated the damage that the stock market crash would eventually cause. Convinced that the economy was sound, Hoover reassured the public that only stock traders would be hurt because of their irresponsible speculation. Unfortunately, among those speculators were huge banks and corporations, which suddenly found themselves on the verge of bankruptcy and unable to pay employees or guarantee bank deposits.
During the Coolidge presidency, Wall Street's power continued to grow unchecked. His administration had close links with an elite group of bankers and financiers, Wall Street's inner circle. Their wealth and connections gave them immense influence over the government's financial policy.
They were small, elite, private partnerships. This was really the royalty of Wall Street. These were very mysterious and discreet places. They were small firms with limited capital, but they exercised really an outsized power.
The most prestigious of these elite firms.
The Great Depression was produced by a failure of government, by a failure of monetary policy. It was produced by a failure of the Federal Reserve System to act in accordance with the intentions of those who established it.
Throughout the 1920s, the agricultural sector lagged behind the rest of the economy. Farmers had put more acres under cultivation during World War I to meet increased demand for agricultural goods. By the 1920s, Europe was back on its feet, yet American farmers did not cut back on production. Mechanization and expansion left American farmers of the 1920s in a cycle of debt, overproduction, and falling commodity prices. Increased tariff rates and an isolationist foreign policy further reduced the international market for American agricultural goods.
Industrial production greatly expanded in the 1920s. New products, such as automobiles and radios, captured the public's imagination. New production techniques such as the assembly line and scientific management increased industrial output. For much of the 1920s, the public, induced by easy credit and seductive advertising, was able to absorb this increased industrial output. However, by 1927, manufacturers noticed that warehouse inventories were on the rise. Consumption just couldn't keep up with the production. A weak labor movement in the 1920s led to stagnant wages. Ordinary Americans did not share in the economic expansion of the 1920s. The gap between the wealthy and the poor grew. During the 1920s, income for the top 1% of the population increased by nearly 75%, while the bottom 90% of the population saw their income rise by less than 10%. By the late 1920s, manufacturers made the logical decision of beginning layoffs, only worsening a bad situation.
By the late 1920s, overproduction of wheat caused a significant drop in the stock prices in that industry. At the same time, other markets were in a state of overproduction, leading to more of a surplus than seen in the years past. This began a loss of confidence in the market. Many realized the prices of stocks were unrealistically high. Of course, stockholders also realized this and sold their stocks. A chain reaction is only natural for others to panic.